So coming up to speak, we have Mark Lackmaker from Aurora Cannabis. He is the director of IR. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name. Right. I try the best I can. He's going to be able to answer a lot of your questions when it comes down to what they're doing from the acquisition standpoint, the international expansion. This is a company that I first highlighted at the San Francisco Money Show back in 2016 when the stock was about 30 cents. So people that got in back then, you're welcome. And now we'll get you some more winners, but this is one you got to keep an eye on.
Just want this. Can I stop this? Hi, everyone. To whoever has seen Aurora speak before, some of you might think Cam has let go of himself a little bit. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay, we'll start again. Hello, everyone. So to those of you who've seen us before, you're probably expecting Cam Badley. He was otherwise engaged because we announced a minor little transaction this morning. So I want to talk you through Aurora, who we are, what we do, how we see the future, and why we think we have what it takes to be one of the winners in the space. So my name is Mark Lackmaker. I'm the Director of Investor Relations. I've been involved with the cannabis industry for about 3 and a bit years, which makes me a bit of a veteran on the capital markets end, which is weird to say with 3 years of experience. And I'm sure that a lot of people in the cannabis culture will tell you that 3 years isn't an awful lot, but this industry is moving at such an incredible pace that 3 years is actually an awful lot of time. If you look at where we have come from, 2 years ago, we were a $40 million company. We had 35 people. We had one facility, a beautiful facility, the first purpose-built facility for cannabis in the world, but that was all we had. Wind the clock 2 years forward, we just announced a $3.2 billion acquisition. We have, pushing to 900 people. We've got, with MedRelief, once the transaction is closed, we've got 11 facilities for 570,000 kilograms a year. It's pretty amazing. So let's look at the cannabis industry. What are we looking at? We're looking at a huge opportunity. And in Canada, we've got the medical market that we're all familiar with. We've got the recreational market coming online. As Brett was saying earlier, it's going to be September, might be October, but whenever it happens, it's going to be a big thing. It's going to be an important thing. But by no means is it the biggest opportunity in cannabis in the world. The biggest opportunity in cannabis for us is the international medical market. If you look at the cannabis industry on a global scale, and you just look at the numbers, there's lots of countries that are adopting legalized medical cannabis right now. We're looking at hundreds of millions of people in countries that are adopting legislation. We're looking at a market opportunity that is probably in excess of 10 million kilograms a year. So recently there has been a lot of talk about a glut of capacity coming online. And we're saying, you know what? In some areas, yes. I just read something about Oregon where they got like 1,000 producers. There's oversupply there. We're looking at the Canadian market where we might have, 1.5, maybe 2 million kilograms in 2 or 3 years' time for a market that is projected to be 900,000, maybe a million kilograms. That sounds like overcapacity. But what I just mentioned is there's a 10 million kilograms global opportunity. That puts it in perspective. We're the first G7 country to legalize cannabis. We're one of the few countries where we've got legalized cannabis production. And because it's federally legalized, we as Canadian companies have the opportunity to start exporting our cannabis. Now, that's not as easy as just growing it and shipping it across, as I will say in a minute. But we are in pole position to really work on this international opportunity. So I just want to talk through a few things that show you, what makes a winner in the cannabis space. And to us, that's a number of points. You need to have scale. 10 million kilogram opportunity, more if you count recreational. You need to be producing at scale. You also have, because in Canada we're going to see margin compression. We don't doubt that that's going to happen in 2 or 3 years' time. So you need to be able to produce at low cost. You also need to be diversified, because if all you do is grow cannabis, you are growing a cash crop where the margins will be compressing in a few years' time. You need to be able to move into other territories where your margins are going to be much higher. You need to have well-developed distribution channels. You need to have a science and R&D team. You need to have the capital to expand and capitalize on the opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about scale. At Aurora, we've got right now 430,000 kilograms, or 430 million grams of funded capacity. We've got Aurora Mountain in Cremona, which is our first facility, which is a beautiful facility which is producing about 4,800 kilograms of cannabis a year on a footprint of 55,000 square feet. That compares very favorable with most others in the space. However, we've got Aurora Sky coming online. And Aurora Sky, and Brett talked a bit about their facility, but I want to talk a bit more about it. Aurora Sky is an amazing feat of engineering. We own Larsen, which is now part of Aurora Larsen Projects. Oh, sorry. They really are the preeminent design consultancy and engineering consultancy in greenhouse construction. They've been going for over 30 years. Thomas Larsen has got an incredible amount of knowledge. And what he has developed is a knowledge of facilities that are incredibly efficient. And not just in terms of, you know, the technology throughput, but if you put the whole package together, there's automation. Now, automation doesn't just make things go quicker. It doesn't just reduce the number of people that you're using. It also means that we have a higher plant density in our base. It also means that we have reduced human-plant interaction. So we're reducing a vector for the introduction of contamination and disease. There's overpressure. There's nothing coming into the facility that we don't want to be in there. We move much faster. If you look at a normal greenhouse, a typical greenhouse, you may have 2, maybe 3 turns or harvests a year. Welcome. If you look at our Aurora Mountain facility, we already do more than 5 harvests a year out of that facility. And the same will go for Aurora V and our H2 facility, the La Chute facility. Now, Aurora Sky is yet another step up. We're going to have more than 6 turns a year out of Aurora Sky. And if you combine the increased plant density, the reduced labor, reduced energy, add everything up, we're going to end up with production costs that we believe will lie well below $1 a gram. So we're producing at massive scale, but we're also got very low cost. And because Aurora Sky, by its nature, we call it a hybrid greenhouse. It's more an indoor customized facility with a very highly specialized glass roof. If you shine light through the glass and you hold your hand here, there's no shadows there because the lights get scattered so much that even the buds underneath get a lot more light. So everything is aimed at optimizing yields, optimizing efficiency, reducing cost. The other thing is, because it's an indoor facility, we control all the environmental variables. And growing cannabis at scale is actually very difficult. People say, you know, it's a weed, it grows everywhere. You know, it grows outdoors. Yes, that's very true. But if you want to grow cannabis at consistent quality, at massive scale, throughout the year, at predictable outputs, and at high quality, you need to control your variables. And we are able to do that. It means that we've got very high quality cannabis at low cost and huge quantities. So what you're going to see coming out of us over the next quarters is Aurora Sky, which is coming online. You're going to see rapidly increasing outputs. Aurora Sky, it's still, you know, working towards completion. We're targeting that for the middle of this year, but we're already actually growing in the facility. We've got a lot of plants in there. If you go to our website, which is up here, I mean, I could show you, but there's pictures inside of Aurora Sky right now. There's plants in, the overhead systems are in. We're looking, you know, at the first harvest in June of this year. Like I said, it's licensed for production. We are awaiting. We need to do 2 harvests, and then you sort of queue up for your sales license. What we're looking at is massively increasing production and revenues coming out of Aurora Sky. So that gives us a great product at a low price. But there's more to it. If you look at the cannabis industry, it's evolving. If you look at what's happening down here in the US, you see lots of edibles, lots of derivative products. That's one side of it. The other side is that we are going to see more targeted medical therapies. Medical therapies that are more narrowly, applicable to specific, ailments, affection, whatever you want to call it, that will carry a much higher margin. So you need to be able to not just develop these other products, also develop new drug delivery products. And through the acquisition of Canamet, we've got a fantastic new product development team. And combining that with our own scientific people, we made a number of appointments as well. We now got about 17 MSCs and PhD in the firm, the scientists in the firm. That is a big team. Once we complete the transaction with MedRelief, we have a scientific team of about 30 people with a lot of knowledge in the space. Our VP of product development is Shane Morris, who's well known in the industry, who's been responsible for the development of a number of novel drug delivery therapies, technologies. So what you'll be seeing coming out of Aurora is a lot of exciting new product and technology development. And that's where the industry needs to head to. That's where you need to head to as a company if you want to be a winner. Because we don't just want to be producing cannabis, we want to capture the higher margin. That's one of the reasons why we're vertically integrated. We're vertically integrated from the design and build of facilities all the way through to customer care, patient outreach, and education. We're capturing margin across the value chain in the cannabis industry. Not just having those beautiful products, you need to be able to shift those products. So you need to have distribution channels. We've got distribution channels in the medical industry. We've got distribution channels in the adult consumer use industry once it's legalized. You probably know we own 25% of Alcanna, as it's now known. Used to be known as Liquor Stores North America. Liquor Stores is the dominant liquor retail chain in Western Canada. And in the provinces of Alberta and British Columbia, we're going to have private enterprise actually selling cannabis straight to retail. That's a very different animal. And again, that stake is, us hedging ourselves within the adult consumer use market against margin compression. Because when in 2 or 3 years' time from now, we've got a lot more production coming online, you'll see that the bargaining power will shift towards the retailers. And by owning 25% of one of the dominant retailers in the space, we will be protected for margin. Now, to talk a bit more about margin, let's talk about the international market. It's not just big, it's huge, but it's also very, very restricted. If you're looking at Germany, where we actually own Pedanios, Pedanios is the largest distributor of cannabis within the German medical system. And the German medical system is beautiful. It started last year, March, when they had legalized cannabis, but what they introduced was broad insurance coverage of medically prescribed cannabis. So about 75% of all patients in Germany actually get their cannabis reimbursed. And what that does is it creates a lot of price stability. So even though there's going to be a lot of production in Canada, we can shift a lot of or send a lot of our production to Germany, for instance. And in Germany, the prices we get for our cannabis are much higher than what we get here. Our cannabis before discounts and before compassionate pricing retails at about $9 a gram. In Germany, we get about $12.50 a gram. It fluctuates a little bit with currency fluctuations, but you can tell we get a lot more money. And the beautiful thing is we own the distributor. So we get 100% of the money that the pharmacies pay us for our cannabis. So we get that $12.50, which it is right now. And sorry, I am talking Canadian, by the way. So we're talking Canadian dollars. It's not just that the prices are higher. And one of the reasons the prices are higher is that the markets are incredibly restricted. The German market, the EU market, requires that you produce your cannabis in EU GMP certified facilities. EU GMP, GMP stands for Good Manufacturing Practices. It's a pharmaceutical standard. And it basically means that your facility has to comply with a number of very strict, precautions, design, workflow. It's a difficult thing to achieve. It's very expensive to achieve, and it's pretty much impossible if your facility wasn't built towards those standards to begin with. So what this results in is that we've got a market that is much larger than Canada. I mean, if you look at the EU, even after Brexit, it's going to be well over 400 million people. But there's only very few companies that can sell into this market. There's only one company in Europe that currently produces. It's a Dutch company called Bedrocan. They have to sell their cannabis to the government, and then the Dutch government will sell the cannabis either internally in the Netherlands and export a little bit of it. Some of it actually goes to Pedanios, and then Pedanios sells it on to the pharmacies. What I'm trying to say is that this is a much bigger market that is heavily restricted. It's incredibly hard to get into. There's no domestic production. And of the international companies, there's only a handful that can actually send production to Europe. Now, in Europe, Germany, where Germany goes, generally the other countries follow. The second country we've seen is Italy. We were the only company to win in the tender as the first non-government company to sell cannabis into Italy. It was a very strict tender. It was a 2 or 3 stage process. And in the final tender, there were only 2 companies that were allowed to tender to get the supply contracts. We won all of the supply contracts in this tender, but it shows you how difficult it is to get into a market like this. Through the ownership of Pedanios, and Pedanios, our distributor, by the way, is also GMP certified for the import, export, release, and distribution of cannabis, we can sell into other EU countries. What I was saying, there's no production really in Europe. I know that Canopy is building something, and we're going to be building the largest facility in Europe, and it's going to be a Sky class facility. By Sky class, we mean a facility that is similar to Sky, very high technology, high quality cannabis, low production costs. We will be building that in Denmark with a joint venture partner, which is a company called Alfred Pedersen & Son. Again, they've been around for 30 years, one of the largest vegetable growers in Europe. They produce something like 100,000 kilograms of tomatoes a day. So they are pretty used to producing at scale. And through Pedersen, we've also got a facility right now that we're retrofitting because we want to have some production in Europe as we're building this massive new facility, which is going to be 1 million square feet. It's going to be 120,000 kilograms plus per year. But while we're building that, we're retrofitting an existing greenhouse, which was actually designed by Larsen, but was designed by Larsen well over 10 years ago. It's going to be EU GMP. We're going to be able to export from this facility. It's going to be, at full capacity, about 8,000 kilograms a year. So it's a massive opportunity. There's only a few companies that can sell into it. We're one of those companies. We're one of the companies with the production, the low-cost structure, the product development, the distribution channels, and the brands. We got brands, not just retail brands. Once we complete the transaction with MedRelief, we'll have a number of freshly launched retail brands. Aurora, as a licensed producer, out of all the licensed producers, I would say, is closest to the cannabis culture, which gives us huge kudos within the space and great recognition of our brand, not just medically, but also for the adult consumer use space. Those are the recreational brands, but the medical brand is incredibly important. And there we're going to have 3 brands. We're going to have MedRelief, which is a very strong medical brand in Canada. We're going to have Aurora, which is a very strong international medical brand. And we have Canamed. And Canamed is a company we acquired not very long ago. CanniMed is the granddaddy of the cannabis space in Canada. They've been producing cannabis since 2001. They were the first company in. We acquired them because we saw a lot of synergies. We saw a lot of opportunities to accelerate this company. But more than anything, we acquired them because of their strength in the medical space. Not just their product development, but their medical brand. They have organically built up a network of over 5,000 referring physicians. Between CanniMed, Aurora, and MedRelief, we'll have huge amounts of data that can influence and that can steer our production philosophy, can steer our strain development, that can steer how we interact with customers, that can, you know, drive further innovation. Because as an organization, Aurora is very well known for its innovation. We were the first company to have a mobile app for ordering cannabis. So people in the morning can get out of their bed, get on the phone, 10 seconds, place an order. And because we do same-day delivery in a couple of metropolitan areas in Alberta, that same afternoon people will have cannabis. And if you're talking about brand, because there's going to be a lot of talking about what is going to be possible in terms of branding, there's not going to be a lot of possible branding in terms of products. What you are going to be able to do is brand yourself as an organization. And in the medical space, that's incredibly important. That's going to be your background in science, your involvement in clinical research. We're doing all of that. But it's the entire customer experience of dealing with you as an organization. The app is great. Same-day delivery is great. We've invested heavily in customer care. The way people interact with us, they really appreciate how we're there for them. We're close to the culture. We understand where they're coming from. We also own an organization called CanvasRx. CanvasRx is Canada's largest patient counseling and education facility. Also does a lot of physician education. And it's about reaching out. It's about being seen. It's about being understood that we are there for them to give them the product that they need. Reliably, having the quantities, the quality, and the care for patients. And that's a model we'll be exporting that we'll be bringing across the globe. We're going to move that model into Europe, where we're going to be seeing growth and acceleration. So the final piece to the puzzle is being able to execute with agility, to execute with speed. What I was saying earlier, 2 years ago, we were 40 million bucks, 35 people. Now we're nearly 900 people. We have a $5 billion market cap. We're the second largest in terms of revenues. We've gone past everyone. We started 19 months after what we call the Blessed 13. Was the first 13 original companies that were granted a license. We've gone past all of them apart from Canopy, which in itself is an amalgamation of 3 of the original 13. We are able to move very rapidly on opportunities, and that's also what allowed us to acquire or to looking to acquire MedRelief now. We've closed 15 transactions in the last 2 years, 8 acquisitions, 7 strategic investments. Those investments have done well for us. Those investments make us a much stronger company with much broader reach, more products, more capacity, and more science. And as a result of this rapid execution, we're now the second largest. And after we've consummated this acquisition, we're going to be the largest cannabis company. And we believe we're going to be the best company. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll open the floor for questions. Okay. What are our revenue streams right now, and how do we see them develop over the next year? So we've got a number of revenue streams. Obviously, medical cannabis in Canada, and that is dried flower and cannabis oils. Then we've got dry cannabis to Germany and to Italy. And right now, we're working on getting the required permitting to start exporting oils as well. It needs to be going through a bit of a process, but we believe that that's going to happen pretty imminently. Then we've got a number of subsidiaries. Aurora Larsen Projects is our design consultancy. This past quarter, because a lot of things happened. They generated about 3 million in revenues. That's going to be a little bit lumpier development over the next year, but there will be more revenues coming out of there. We own BC Northern Lights, which is a producer of grow boxes for the home grow market. In Canada, it looks like people will be able to grow cannabis at home. And there's lots of people that live in condos, and condo condo boards will not let you have smelly cannabis in the house. These grow boxes are wonderful. They're lockable, so they're safe for kids. They are completely odor-free, so you don't have that issue. And they create a great environment for cannabis to grow in. We also own Urban Cultivator, which is grow boxes, but more for organic vegetables and microgreens. Martha Stewart is actually a great fan of our products. No, seriously, she uses it. She writes about it. I believe Snoop Dogg actually likes our stuff as well, because Martha and Snoop have a cooking show together. Sorry, I'll get to you in a minute. So how do we see this develop over the coming year? These are all interesting things, but we see rapid development coming with Sky coming online, Aurora V coming online, later in the year, the La Chute facility coming online, and our facility in Odense in Denmark coming online. We're going to have a massive increase in production capacity. And as a result of that, we're going to see a massive increase in revenues, because the markets right now are supply restricted. Germany, Italy, other markets are supply restricted. If we could ship over 10,000 kilograms today, we could probably sell 10,000 kilograms in Germany. And that's only gonna increase rapidly. We're not really putting a figure on it, but just think about it. Aurora Sky is 100,000 kilograms a year. We think that we'll be at full capacity optimistically the end of the year, but let's be a bit more conservative, beginning of 2019, and draw a line from where we're now to there up to 100,000 kilograms a year. That's 100 million grams. We still got very good prices within the Canadian medical system. We got very good prices internationally. We use part of that product to produce higher margin products such as oils. We're going to use part of that product to to produce other high margin products. Put any number in front of that 100,000 and you'll get an indication of where we're going as an organization in terms of revenues. It's probably about 360 million shares, but I'm glad that you bring this up. People have been talking about Aurora in terms of dilution. Now, if we were issuing shares and using that money to buy waistcoats for our cats, that would not be a good use of funds. If we were using that money only to buy capacity, that would not be a great use of our money. If, however, you use that money to complement the pieces in the puzzle to hit all these points that I just talked about, it's a very different thing. We're not just issuing shares for nothing. We're issuing shares, and what we're getting back in return is one of the preeminent cannabis companies in the world, one of the strongest medical brands, multiple recreational brands, a fantastic science team, fantastic product development, international distribution channels, great domestic distribution. They got a high percentage of veterans who are their patients. That means that these are people who get their cannabis reimbursed. They consume large quantities of cannabis, but they're loyal customers, and we're building on that. So it's about brand strength. They're incredibly well known. The two companies are also very compatible in terms of our philosophy, basically along these points. They have fantastic facilities. They grow some of at the highest industry yields, so we can utilize the knowledge of the two companies to accelerate growth. And that's what it's about. It's not about buying an asset and making it chug along. It's about fitting in another element in the puzzle and really accelerating growth. That's why we bought Canamet. That's why we bought MedRelief. Yes, we had to issue shares for it, but we got something in return. And what we got in return, we believe, is going to be valuable, much more valuable than if the companies had continued to operate by themselves. There's no banking issues in Canada. Not like in the US. No, we're not running around the streets with big bags of cash. Luckily, it's no. We've got banks, and if you look at it, this transaction, our advisor was Bank of Montreal, which is one of the 5 largest banks in Canada. I'm not entirely sure what the market cap is, but I'll probably be pushing towards $100 billion. We bank with normal banks. And in the recreational space, that won't be different, because the difference is that cannabis in Canada is federally regulated, whereas in the US, where it's legalized, it's at the state level. And banks with a cross-country footprint don't want to fall foul of federal regulations. Now, here's another interesting thing about sort of the US versus Canada. When I was saying earlier, there's only very few companies that can actually sell into the European market. No US company, I hate to say it for you guys, but no US company can actually play in Europe because they're not allowed to do anything across the border. So we're in a market with huge growth, very few competitors, and zero competition from the US, which is pretty unique. And that's one of the reasons, to get back, why we're acquiring a company like MedRelief, why we're acquiring a company like Canamet, because there is a finite time window in which we can capitalize on this huge opportunity. And it's about hitting these boxes, getting the scale, the cost, the diversification, the integration right, moving very rapidly, having that early mover advantage, being able to build up a very significant market share that will allow us to, by the time that the US does, legalize things at a federal level, that we're able to move into the US and not the other way around. That's fully funded. That will be funded for a large part out of cash flow. If you looking forward, if we need more cash, we will be looking at other opportunities like that. I think that as an industry, we're at a stage right now where the larger companies, have established themselves very well. And therefore, I think it will be able to, if we need more financing, because there's so many opportunities. I'm saying there's a finite window in which we really can create something absolutely amazing. If we need more capital for that, we'll be looking at that. Not a guarantee that that happens, but, we'll be looking at that as well. Because CanTrust isn't where MedRelief is. CanTrust doesn't give us the firepower. It doesn't give us the breadth of product development. It doesn't give us the established brands. It's an interesting company. I mean, if I'm looking at the Canadian space, there's the big 4, obviously. Hopefully once we consume this transaction, it's going to be the big 3. And then there's a few companies behind there, like CanTrust, like TGOD, like Kronos. And then there is a large number of companies where we don't really know where they're going to go. We think that not all companies are going to make it, because a lot of these smaller companies, they don't have the distribution channel, so they will be relying on wholesale. And wholesale prices within the recreational system, we believe the prices will go down quite dramatically. If you're not able to produce at very low cost, you're going to have a problem. These are a lot of companies that are going to be farmers of cannabis, and I think a lot of them are going to disappear. There's going to be more consolidation, but again, just adding one facility and another facility, to have 2 facilities doesn't give you necessarily economy of scale. Sorry? We're out of time. Okay, thank you very much.
You'll be able to hear from him in 40 minutes. So save your questions. We got a lot more coming.
Thank you very much.